Good afternoon, good evening, good night, and good morning. My name is Deepak Biscuitwala, and I am today's our webinar. Before we talk about the webinar, I want to just talk about a little bit ground rules. So if you have any question during the webinar, please use your right side panel question section and put your question over there. We will address all your questions during the Q&A section at the end of the webinar. This webinar will be 1 hour long, 45 minutes webinar and 15 minutes for Q&A. To continuing education credit, you have to be at least 45 minutes on the webinar. By saying that, today our webinar is continuation of the last webinar, motivation. Let me introduce Dr. Brooks. It is my privilege and learn a lot of things from him. Brooks is a leader in the application of the discipline of to the improvement of safety performance. He has co-authored and published many articles, including the chapter on benchmarking and performance appraisal in the Safety Professional Handbook, and also a book on measurement matters, how effective assessment drives business and safety performance. Brooks has done a lot of, including leading a manufacturing teams in Silicon Valley, developing safety improvement for major chemical companies, the development of marketing strategies for pharmaceutical manufacturers. Brooks is A.B. cum laude honors from Yale University, and he earned his PhD in experimental psychology from the University of Pennsylvania. Let me introduce Brooks. Brooks, your time, and please continue.
Thank you, Deepak. First, I want to apologize. I have a bad cold, and so there may be pauses if I go into a fit of coughing. I'm hoping to make it through, but I don't have 100% reliability on it. Okay, something is wrong here. I've got the second slide up. Okay, session 1, focus on problems with incentives. Behaviorist theory is not correct. I tortured those of you who were in the session with various arcane studies to prove that. They were important to me, probably less important to you, but the bottom line is behaviorist theory is not correct. Incentives impair creativity and problem solving. Difficult, complex tasks are not helped by incentives, they're hurt by them. There are hundreds of studies that demonstrate this. CEOs who get the most incentive pay perform the worst, probably because they become overconfident. And incentives can lead to a focus on the incentive rather than the job to be done, and often lead to gaming the system or cheating. I told the sad story of the school teachers in Chicago who were faced with losing their jobs if they didn't achieve a certain result on standardized tests. And there was a lot of cheating, which was detected by some bright statisticians. And cheating's not right, but it's certainly predictable out of the situation because people were going to lose their jobs. It's a pretty strong incentive. And the results were predictable. Session 2 will explore drives, emotions, building intrinsic motivation, which is the alternative to incentive motivation, and finally maximizing employee engagement. Now, I showed this list of drives in the first session, but I've expanded it somewhat. we have our basic physiological drives at the top: hunger, thirst, sex, warmth, rest, safety. The next one is possessiveness. Your property, your spouse is part of what's yours, and you'll defend it with your life. Not necessarily in highly civilized society, but in many cultures, it comes to that. Belonging, being part of a group or a family is, I put that in red because that can be a motivation on the job. Many good companies have a family atmosphere, and belonging to the group is an important source of motivation to be in the company. Self-esteem. The drives that have an M by them are part of Maslow's system of drives. Curiosity. One of the ways I observe curiosity is, you don't find this too often anymore, but it used to, when you had an elevator in a large building, you had a little dial that showed what floor the elevator was on. Now, watching that dial makes no difference as to when you're going to get the elevator, but everybody watches it. They want to know where that elevator is, even though it's not going to make any difference in their trip to the next floor. Mastery. People want to succeed at solving problems. People want to have some control over their environment. It relates to Seligman's concept of helplessness and locus of control, for those of you who are into psychology. Religion, I never thought of religion as a drive, but it was pointed out that virtually all people are religious in some way. Addiction is certainly a drive, but it's an artificial drive. It's very interesting. It's a drive that you create, but it's a strong drive once it's established. Honor. And I want to do a poll here, see if we can do this as a way of talking about what a strong drive honor is. Let's see. Theoretically, I can do it.
Bruce, do you have a question there?
Okay. I've got it.
Yeah.
The poll is, can people see the poll on their screen? The question is, which state has the highest murder rate? New York, Michigan, Louisiana, New Mexico, or Illinois? Okay, we've got 30%, 41% voted. Wait another minute or so. Okay, we're seem to be stable at 59%. So 29% of the people said New York, 24% said Michigan, 35% said Illinois, 6% said Louisiana, and 6% said New Mexico. Well, most of you are wrong. It's Louisiana. Has the highest per capita murder rate, and next to it is Mississippi. The highest murder rates are in the rural South, and the chief motivation is honor. Somebody insulted you, so you kill them. Now, that didn't happen among my friends. None of my friends have killed because of insults. I wouldn't be alive if I hung out with people that kill because of insults, but it's a powerful motivation. It's simply we're able to deal with it, and the culture in the rural South is different. Finally, self-actualization, which is another red drive, which can be useful in business. And where is money? Well, money can solve some of the problems in the foregoing list, but money itself, unless you're addicted to it, it is not really a drive. Now here's how drives work in the mind. You have two systems for decision making and information processing. System one is unconscious. It's fast. It's really made for defense, but it's not stupid. It can handle a lot of complexity. My favorite example is when in a baseball game, when a batter hits a ball towards center field, the center fielder knows within less than a second where that ball is going to land. And that's a very complicated computation. If you try to work that out by hand, you couldn't do it. The first computers were invented to calculate ballistic arcs during wartime. And drives originate in system one. System one is very impulsive. It demands action. Fortunately, you have system two, which is more recent in terms of evolution. It's just like a Supreme Court. It's conscious, it's rational, and it can either ratify the decisions of system one or change them. And an example, probably most of you have tried some kind of diet, whether it's gluten-free or restriction of calories, or it seems to be, I don't know many people who haven't tried this. You have an urge to eat, and then system two is sitting there saying, I've got to not eat that. And the urge to eat is really nonverbal. You want food. The inhibition coming from system two is quite intellectual and rational, but it often doesn't win. System two frequently doesn't win, and frequently isn't even deployed. But even when it's deployed, it certainly didn't work for me. I can't tolerate a calorie restriction. I can't make it. No matter how hard my system two pushes, it won't stop the eating behavior. This is motivation portrayed as a system where you have a drive coming from system one through system two to action. And the action may be modified by system two, it may be prevented by system two, or it may simply come directly from system one. The environment has an influence on this. For example, you may have a hunger drive, but if you're being chased by a saber-toothed tiger, you're not going to stop and eat. You're going to do something else. Past experience has an influence on the drive. If you know where to get food, because if you know a good restaurant, that's going to determine where you eat. The action you take, like if you eat something, it's going to reduce the drive. Excuse me. A feedback loop there, and the action you take is also going to influence past experience. I do this just to say it's not a simple system. There are certainly more feedback loops, but you can't simply say a drive is going to lead to behavior, bam, bam. There's a lot of complexity in the expression of a drive. Now, I want to talk about emotion. And where does emotion come from? I thought about it a great deal, came up with a solution, and then went to the literature and found that my solution was the only solution in the literature, but it was found by some other people long before I did. I like an analogy of it's a buildup of pressure. If you're being shot out of a cannon and you're proceeding down the tube of the cannon and you get stuck, the pressure builds up behind you, and that's analogous to emotion. It's pressure buildup because you can't achieve success in satisfying a drive, and emotion becomes a very powerful motivator. When I was in graduate school, we talked about a theory of frustration and aggression. Frustration leads to aggression. It's easy to demonstrate in animals. It's pretty easy to demonstrate in humans. But it's what frustration leads to, frustration being blocking the satisfaction of a drive. It leads to emotion. This is a kind of a system diagram of if you got an approach process, like there's something you want to get, and if you're having good progress, if you're doing well, you feel elation. And if you're doing poorly, you feel sadness, depression, or depending on the strength of the drive, you feel anger and frustration. The avoidance, if you're trying to get away from something, like if an axe murderer is chasing you, you get away from him, you feel relief and calmness. If you're not getting away from him, you feel terror, fear, anxiety. And again, that's powerful motivation. You fight pretty hard. Now, how we deal with emotions is very important. Probably a lot of you have read Daniel Goleman's book called Emotional Intelligence. He didn't invent the concept, but he is the one who popularized it. Some psychologists came up with the idea before him. But Goleman points out that there are a lot of people with IQs of 150 who are working for somebody with an IQ of 100. But that person with the IQ of 100 has high emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is a very, very important characteristic of an effective leader. What is emotional intelligence? Probably a lot of you know, but it's the ability to understand, first, the ability to understand your own emotions. Remember, emotions arise like drives in system one, which is not verbal. So you may just have a strong feeling. You don't know where it's coming from or what it really means. That's a stepping stone to developing the ability to act appropriately in the face of strong emotion. Not to quit when you're frustrated, not to lash out or be abusive, particularly when you're in a position of power. And the third characteristic is the ability to be sensitive to the emotions of others. When you get hip to your own emotions and how they develop, you begin to understand the other people's emotions and develop empathy and the ability to deal with people in emotional states. And finally, it's the ability to help others respond appropriately, which you can only do if you're sensitive to their emotions, and you can only do if you're together vis-a-vis your own emotions. Goleman describes programs for children that are educational, that can develop emotional intelligence. I think that would be better to teach in the schools than much of what's taught. I can't think of a more important subject than that. The programs are apparently successful. I don't think it'll fly very quickly. I would certainly want that for my own children, who fortunately developed fairly decent emotional intelligence. But emotional intelligence is not fixed. In my own life, I went through a fairly dramatic change in my own emotional intelligence. Now, I'm no emotional genius now, but I was an emotional moron in my 30s and 20s. Made a lot of bad decisions, hurt some people, not physically, but emotionally, by lashing out based on my own emotions. And the way my own emotional intelligence changed would shock me. If you had told me when I was 30 that I'd see a psychoanalyst, I would have said you're absolutely crazy. I can't think of anything more stupid than that. And I don't have any faith in psychoanalysis, but I ran into a therapist who was pretty good at teaching me how the origin of my emotions and allowing me to get some control over them. Now, I wasn't a raging maniac. I didn't kill anybody, but it changed my life quite a bit for this. I suspect most of you have fairly high emotional intelligence, but if you find that you're a prisoner of emotions or that you've made bad decisions based on emotion that you regret later, I think you can find help. And if you have subordinates who have this problem, there's help to be had. Okay, if incentives aren't the answer to employee motivation, what is? Well, just stopping the incentive program is a good start. Now that's hard to do. It's so established in our culture that you may be able to minimize it in your own section with your own reports, but to get incentive motivation out of a company is really hard. To make progress, real progress, you need to create conditions that support intrinsic motivation. And we'll talk about what those conditions are. But if you can stop incentives, I strongly recommend it. Now, that's not across the board. If you've got somebody pushing a rock uphill or digging a hole with a shovel, then incentives are fine. They'll probably enhance the behavior. But if you've got people working that requires any creativity or problem-solving ability, the incentives that you're using are probably degrading the performance. Deming was amazing in his insight into psychology, since psychology hadn't arrived at the conclusions yet that Deming drew many years ago. This is a quote from Out of the Crisis. The present style of reward squeezes out from the individual over his lifetime his innate intrinsic motivation, self-esteem, dignity. They build into him fear, self-defense, extrinsic motivation. He was very emotional when he talked about this, by the way. This wasn't he didn't say it like I did. He was very emotional about this. We must preserve the power of intrinsic motivation, dignity, cooperation, curiosity, and joy in learning. He had a very positive view of what the workplace could be. In addition, he pointed out that individual performance could not be measured. And that may strike you as odd. We live on measuring individual performance. I'll give you an example of how that stands on kind of shaky ground. Individual performance depends on the system somebody works in. You can be great in one system and terrible in another, but you're the same person. This is a company I was engaged with. I did not run it at this time. I owned it and ran it later. But there was a young salesman named Doug. He was bright, he was energetic, and he achieved mediocre results. He was selling promotional products, jackets, hats, shirts, pens with company logos on it. It's a big industry, incidentally. There's more revenue flowing through that industry than through the radio industry. So Doug was a disappointment to leadership. With sale, this was in the 90s, so sales of $250,000 a year would equate to a wage or a commission of about $40,000, which was a living wage in those days. But our best salesmen were doing like $1 million a year. The way the company operated, there was a strong sales culture, and that culture required that the salesperson close an order on the first call. If you went on a call and didn't close an order, that was a failure. And Doug didn't want to sell that way. He said, I'd like to go see a customer and find out what he needed, and then go away and make a plan for him and come back and propose what we could do for him. He was told our way or the highway. Our culture, and we're very successful. We have a very good company, and we sell on the initial call. If you don't want to do that, go somewhere else. A new sales manager showed up, and for whatever reason, I guess he wasn't imbued with the culture enough, said, Doug, try it your way. Doug's sales went as high as $2.5 million a year. Now you can imagine how much money Doug made, upwards of $400,000 per year. Pretty good wage selling promotional products. And was Doug a better person selling 2.5 million than selling 250,000? No, he was the same person. In one system, he was a mediocre performer. In the other system, he was an outstanding performer. So measuring the performance of an individual is a little bit tricky. You're much better off, Deming always emphasizes this, you're much better off working on the system than trying to rank people and decide who's good. Now, intrinsic motivation is very strong, and people are very engaged in activities with no extrinsic reward, like golf and tennis. Some people make money at golf. I only lost money, but I was engaged. I have a bad back now and I can't play, and it's a source of immense frustration to me. But I was never any good. I had a single-digit handicap when I was young, but I wasn't a good golfer. But I was engaged. People do crossword puzzles. People play bridge. Marty Seligman, who's probably in the top 5 living psychologists, instead of going to the university, he hired one of the world's best bridge players to partner with him, and went around to bridge tournaments. Again, no money involved, except his pay to the expert bridge player. Here's a poll. Do you know someone? Let me see if I can activate this poll.
I can activate.
Okay. Do you know someone who's more engaged in a non-paying avocation than in their paying job? We don't have any no's yet. Oh, we got 2 no's. That's pretty overwhelming. 89% yes. Yeah.
Getting stabilized, putting the
Yeah,
pause.
we get 59% again. Now, this is more a fault of the way jobs are managed than it is. I mean, the people aren't bad people. They just work in situations that aren't well set up for intrinsic motivation. Now, some people have jobs that couldn't be, but there are plenty of people who have jobs that could be set up for intrinsic motivation that aren't. Now, even the rat has powerful intrinsic motivation. This is, I did a study with Ken Berkowitz, published in Science, which is a very prestigious journal. Most psychologists never get anything in there. It's usually theoretical physics. We trained rats to eat food from a dish. Then we trained them to press a lever to get food. And when offered both sources, they chose to press the lever. And that was pretty reliable. If we required them to press the lever 10 times to get the food, they switched over to the free stuff, ate it out of the dish. If we shifted back to 1 press per food pellet, they went back to pressing the lever, which tells me, number one, that manipulation of the environment in some way is, and it's not surprising, rats are very clever creatures. They work out ways to solve the problems of their environment. I've read that there are something like 2 rats for every human, and basically you can poison them and get rid of them, but they're pretty successful. You can't really reduce the rat population. And it's no accident that all of Skinner's studies had rats pressing a lever. They didn't use other things because that works. But this intrinsic motivation in the rat, he got nothing but effort for pressing the lever. Okay, let's finally get to the workplace. You're not going to have levers for your employees and a dish of food beside it. There has to be some challenge in the work to get intrinsic motivation to work. And the solution must be in the hands of the employee. He must be the person who's able to meet the challenge. It may be that with the relatively routine tasks, having people get together and figure out a better way to do that task, that might build some intrinsic motivation, but I'm not certain. That would be what I would try to do if I had people doing routine tasks. But there has to be some challenge in the work, and I suspect most of you not only have a challenge in your own work, but your reports have a challenge also. Now, Dan Pink suggests 3 requirements for intrinsic motivation. Pink is a Harvard professor, wrote a book called Drive, and very, very good book. And there's a TED Talk by Pink that's very good. He's a good speaker. The employee has to have autonomy. he has to have some say about how the work is conducted. He reports a study of 320 small businesses, half of which gave workers autonomy. The other half relied on top-down direction. The businesses that offered autonomy grew at 4 times the rate of the control-oriented firms and had 1/3 the turnover. That's pretty powerful finding. The second quality is mastery. The employee has to be able to succeed at meeting the challenge. Now, he doesn't have to have total success, but he has to be able to make progress. And third, what Pink's concept is purpose, and what he says is that the worker should understand how what he's doing contributes to the company. That's pretty much what Deming said. I prefer meaningfulness because I think the work needs to be also congruent with the employee's values. The employee might be contributing to the company's success, but he might not think that was very good for the world. So I prefer meaningfulness, but basically the work has to accomplish something. Now I think we have a poll here. Oh, here we go. Okay, yeah, we've got, are you satisfied with the autonomy? 66% yes and 32% no.
So, so Brooke, still poll is open. 59% vote has come in. I'm going to give a couple of more seconds, and it's look like stabilized. So I am closing the poll and sharing the result.
Now, there's one, take the next question.
Okay.
Are you satisfied with mastery?
1 second. So second poll is open.
Wow, I would think that would have scored higher. Wow, that's interesting. Okay, you can close that. 66 to 32, yes. It's about the same as the other one. And open the third one.
I am launching third one. Are you satisfied with the meaningfulness of your work? %50 vote in.
All about the same. Well, I expected pretty good scores here. This is a fortunate group. Gallup's numbers for employee engagement, which this is going to relate to very closely, are that 32% of American workers are engaged, meaning they're motivated.
Hey, Brooks, I don't see your slide.
Let's see if I can get a slide up. You got one now?
No, I don't. I hope people can see the slide.
Maybe somebody can type in the chat. Can they type in the chat?
Yes, you can.
Somebody tell us whether you can see the slide or not.
I think I got some questions. Someone said that no, they can't see the slide.
You got to close the poll.
Yes, I did.
Oh, I see. It's sharing the results.
I think all poll has been closed, and you see the poll. I did.
It's sharing poll results. You should have a slide now, I think. All three polls came out about 70-30. Do you have a slide now, Deepak?
No, I don't.
Let's see. Let's try collapsing the poll. Why don't you work on it and I'll go ahead and talk. We have a couple of more things that we think are important for intrinsic motivation. One is well-being. Well-being requires an environment that supports physical, intellectual, emotional, and spiritual health. That's simple to say and difficult to do. But in our division, our leadership group has decided that this is so important that we have added it to Deming's 4 areas of profound knowledge. So we've got 5 areas of knowledge that are essential for leadership. They don't make you a good leader, but they're necessary to be a good leader. They're not sufficient, but they're necessary. Another thing that's important is recognition. It's a process by which management thanks an employee for a contribution. It should be personal, and it should be clear to the employee that management really understands what they did. It should not be some kind of thing where a manager never met the employee comes and says, "You've done a great job. Here's a jacket, a hat, a pen." If it involves a gift, the gift should be symbolic, not an incentive. If it's an incentive, it's not recognition. My favorite story of recognition is a story about Toyota. Every year they gave an award for continuous improvement, a Kaizen award. The story is out of Imai's book on Kaizen. And one year, a group of women in the dining room had noticed that people sat at the same table for lunch every day, and that some tables drank a lot of tea and some tables had a lot of leftover tea. So they apportioned the tea so that the tables that didn't drink much didn't have a lot of excess at the end. And they saved, probably a few $100s. But it was a beautiful project, and coming from the lowest level employees in the company, and they won the award. The award was a pen presented by the president of the company, but you can bet he knew what they did. I love that story. It's a way that an employee learns that his work is meaningful to the company. It's also if you've been the object of sincere and realistic recognition, it's powerful. It's been powerful for me. Oh my. We shouldn't have that up. This is terrible.
Brooks, I'm sharing my screen, okay?
Yeah, can you, well, let's share mine now.
I'm just taking over and just I change the presenter.
Okay.
Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Okay. Just let me know when to next.
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 Because we're right at the...
Yes.
Yeah, let's pass on this slide. Go to the next one. Oh, why do we continue to emphasize incentive pay? First is ignorance. People don't understand. People believe incentives work. People still believe Skinner. Psychologists don't, but the man in the street does, and it's still taught in introductory psych. It's American. People should be paid for what they do. I had a friend when I was in college. He was on a basketball scholarship at SMU, and I went to Yale. And Yale was, the Ivy League was constructed out of an agreement between the presidents of, I think, 7 colleges that they would not give athletic scholarships. So I said, Yale might admit a guy because he was a good football or basketball player, but if he didn't play, he wouldn't lose a scholarship. And my friend thought that was wrong. He thought that was evil. The guy should have to play. And literally, he was saying that he was a professional athlete, but it was un-American for the Yale guy to not play and still get a scholarship. It's simple. Rather than solve system problems, you just say, well, we'll crank up the incentives and let people work hard enough to solve the problem. Doesn't work that way. But it seems so simple on the face of it. I think an important part of it is tradition. Frederick Taylor, the early part of this century, created a concept of scientific management. And if you read Taylor's writing, you'll get sick. Taylor said basically that employees were a bunch of bums and would not work unless you had powerful incentives to work. He recommended piecework because otherwise employees wouldn't work. And I had the experience of working in a Ford plant in 1960 between high school and college. And the opposite was the case. The workers were frustrated because the cars were rotten. They were making terrible cars, and the workers felt awful. But it wasn't they didn't want to work. They wanted to make something that was successful. Finally, I think because of the huge bonuses that senior executives get, that it's partly self-interest. They want incentives to continue because the incentives are treating them awfully well. Now that's a hard list to overcome, but that's my list. Certainly on the scientific grounds, you can win the argument, but it's so established in our culture that there should be incentives, and good boys and good girls should get good things, that it's going to be difficult to defeat. Go to the next slide. So if you want motivated employees, first pay them a fair wage. You don't have to pay them the highest wage. Certainly shouldn't have incentives in there. If you have to have them, minimize them. But pay a fair wage. Paying more doesn't help. Avoid incentive compensation and pay for performance. Make the work interesting. give them autonomy, enable them to master the work, make sure they understand the purpose of their work and that they feel it's meaningful, recognize success, and create an environment that supports physical, intellectual, emotional, and spiritual health. And you can take that slide home and do the best you can. It's going to be an uphill fight to create those conditions, although I would say this group is very lucky to be working in better conditions than most. So thank you very much. Time for questions if there are any.
Hi, thank you very much. Let's see what question we have today. So meanwhile, I'm looking at the question, if you don't mind, on the right panel under the chat section, I'm going to put this survey link, probably if you can able to take a survey. Meanwhile, we are doing question and answer. So first question I have today, do the autonomy poll results surprise you? So Brooks, this is for you. The result we saw surprise you?
The results we saw in the polls?
Yes, about the autonomy.
Yes, they did.
And how do
they were a little better than I expected. I expected something better than 70% not having autonomy. I expected maybe 50-50. But that's, I mean, that doesn't mean much. But I felt good about the results. Most of you are working in a good situation. That's great. I'm also surprised I got through this without coughing.
There's another question from David. There's a desire to pay individuals differently based on experience, skill level, education, service skills than others.
I'm sorry.
Okay, I'm going to repeat the question. Brooks, are you there?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm repeating question or comment. There is a desire to pay individuals differently based on experience, skill level, education, service skill, others. Thoughts that pay for performance.
I'm going to look at, I can't understand.
So what our asking is that you mentioned about the desire to pay individuals differently based on experience or skill level or education or any other kind of talent. Do you have any thoughts on the pay for performance?
Do I have any thoughts on
Pay for performance?
Yeah, it's terrible.
Okay.
First place, you can't really measure performance. And in the second place, it's an incentive program. I mean, it's Deming's whole, that's all he talked about. That's the terminology he used for incentives, pay per performance.
Okay, Brooks, thank you. I have one more question. What do you think about job craft? That means employees redesigning their own jobs.
I think that's great. It's got to be well managed. I mean, you can't have chaos. I always preferred to have teams that included people at many levels, but not dominated by managers. Um, but I think having, employees should certainly have a say in how their jobs are designed.
So, Brooke, okay, sorry, go ahead.
No, I strongly approve of that.
So there is another question for you. What is an alternative method of paying if not paying by performance?
Well, you pay for experience, knowledge, um, time in the job, amount of responsibility. The Hay system, probably many large companies use Hay as a consulting firm that constructs salaries based on the job characteristics. They're pretty good, really.
There is a audience, Arthur. He has kind of comment plus he needs your thoughts on his question or comments. I'm a strong advocate for worker motivation to be generated by job satisfaction, regular in-house seminar, etc., and not cash. Cash incentives to generate culture of greed for more or underperformance. Any
Yeah, he's
comment?
right. Yeah, and job satisfaction comes out of autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Yes, I think the person's exactly right. You got to pay people fairly, but paying them more is not going to help you.
I agree. I have a pretty good example for that I can contribute here. I have one employee. Other day he came to me and say, Deepak, I'm not paid fair, and I'm looking for some raise. If I get it, then probably I'll find out a new job. And I said, do my best, but our goal is to pay you fairly, but still is not enough, not in the market fair. So anyway, but those kind of things happen real life, and you have to deal with that, and it is very hard to figure out what is a fair pay.
That's why people hire Hay, because they have so much data, comparison data. They know the market.
Okay. So there's another question, Brooks. Would you please repeat the name of the consulting company who designs the pay system effectively?
Who designed what now?
Pay system.
Oh, Hay, Hay.
HAY.
The Hay Group.
There's another question for you, Brooks. Should psychometric testing be mandatory when selecting persons for jobs so that a job will be more related to the person's personality than education qualification?
I didn't understand the question.
This is the last question on the question section. Repeat for you again. Should psychometric testing be mandatory when selecting person for jobs so that a job will be more related to person personality rather than education or qualification?
Well, I think that's dangerous. You run the risk of somebody not being able to do the job. Psychometric testing is great, but it should be combined with some estimate of the person's capability to actually perform the work.
It seems like there are not many questions coming in.
Well, it also seems like it's right at the end of an hour.
Yes. So again, please accept our apology for little bit technical difficulty today. Uh, what we will do is we will post this recording and PowerPoint on our Human Development and Leadership website. We also send you survey. I also put the survey link on our chat section. Take a chance or you get a moment, finish the survey. Otherwise, you will get the survey link from Brooks or from myself. Again, thank you very much. Webinar will be next month, sometime in mid-July. Please look for that for upcoming seminar. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And the last thing, one of the audience, Brooks, this comment for you, get better soon. So, Brooks, you can do other more seminars.
I'm sorry?
One of our audience posted the comment that Brooks, get better soon because of your. Okay, thank you very much. The end of the webinar. See you next time.